Hey everybody, it's your old pal Mike. I hope you're happy, healthy, and safe, and welcome back to the channel for another round of reviews. But what's this? Well, that's not a Jazzmaster. In fact, it is not. It is an American original Jaguar, in Sonic Blue no less. I am so excited to tell you about the Jazzmaster's shorter and younger sibling. What makes it special, what makes it fun and cool, and a little bit different from the Jazzmaster, as well as particulars about the American original 60s Jaguar series. These are great guitars, they're very much worth your time, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. But before we get into it, I'd like to give a very special shout out and thank you to Wes, the owner of this American original Jaguar that you see in my lap. He brought this guitar to me for a setup, and as I was working on it, I fell in love with it, and I couldn't resist the urge to make a video and tell you all about it. So, thank you, Wes, for being permissive and for being patient as I filmed today's video. All right, let's dig in. The American original Jaguar features a maple neck with a 24-inch scale, a bound rosewood fretboard with pearloid dots, 21 vintage tall frets, a synthetic bone nut, and a 9.5-inch radius on the round lamb fretboard. The headstock wears vintage-style split-shaft tuners, while the alder body features a thin nitrocellulose finish in Daphne blue with US hardware and electronics. The pickups are pure vintage 62 Jaguar pickups that have healthy output and a fierce sound. The guitar is currently strung with a set of Ernie Ball power slinkies. Now, if you happen to be familiar with the previous American vintage 65 reissues, well, the American original is not all that different. The main differences being the 9.5-inch radius fretboard as well as the 62 reissue pickups. To my mind, these pickups are very similar indeed to the old AVRI 62s, and in fact, nearly identical tonally. I can't really detect a difference to what I know to be the old familiar AVRI 62 sound. So these are good pickups. You may never feel the need to update them. However, if you are like me and you prefer something a little bit more midsy for a Jaguar, then there are definitely options for you out there. However, still good basic pickups. I think you should at least play the guitar as is before you make any sweeping changes. Now, before we get too far into this, I want to take a moment and run you through the Jaguar's myriad tonal options, because I know that for a lot of people, there's a lot going on here with switches and dials and doodads and whatever, but I find the Jaguar to be uniquely versatile within the Fender lineup. So let's take a moment, let's run through all of the sounds available, and we'll talk about it. All right? Now, while Jaguar controls can indeed seem confusing, they are actually not all that much more complicated than Jazzmaster controls. On a Jaguar, you've got two discrete circuits, just like on a Jazzmaster, one for lead, which most modern players just use as their normal everyday sound, which allows for selections between the bridge and neck pickups, as well as the volume and tone controls that you might find on most other guitars. That bit is straightforward. You've also got the rhythm circuit, with the switch in the upward position, which activates the neck pickup and runs it through a different set of controls meant to sound much darker and rounder than those of the lead circuit. If you weren't aware, this is actually the jazz in the Jazzmaster. This is what Leo Fender meant to be the basic sound of the guitar, and you would activate the much brighter lead circuit when it was time for you to step out from behind the band and take solo. But with hindsight as our guide, we know that things didn't quite work out the way that Leo Fender intended for the Jazzmaster and Jaguar, and I have to say a lot of people don't even explore up here. They tape it off or they disconnect it, and that's fine. But if you've got a rhythm circuit, or if you're not a stranger to this channel, then you should know that I love the rhythm circuit, and I think it's worth exploring. There is a world of dark clarity available to you with the flick of a switch. Now, the other main difference between a Jazzmaster and a Jaguar in terms of controls is that the Jaguar utilizes a bank of 3 switches here on the lead circuit instead of the traditional 3-way toggle that you'll find on the Jazzmaster. With this, the Jaguar allows you to select the bridge pickup, the neck pickup, both on or both off, as well as what we call the strangle switch. Now, the strangle switch is one of my favorite features on the Jaguar. It basically is a bass cut switch. It thins out the tone and makes it really wiry for a different sound overall. It's great for leads, it's great for surfy chord work. It's also really useful when you've got a very big sounding fuzz and you want to thin out the low end a little bit. It really does a good job of cutting through a full band mix. So the strangle switch is actually a lot of fun to use. Now, the strangle switch is not only one of my favorite features of the Jaguar, it's also one of my favorite guitar sounds overall. And if you're sitting there watching this video saying to yourself, well, I don't think I've ever heard anybody use it, you're wrong. You've actually been hearing it for 20-something years on Weezer's Say It Ain't So. That's right, the clean guitar parts on that song were recorded with Rick Ocasek's 65 Jaguar using the strangle switch and the neck pickup. If you don't believe me, check out this excerpt from the Weezer video that's pretty much started it all for this channel, that kept me going. Now, to get the sound from the intro of Say It Ain't So, you're going to need a Fender Jaguar, and the reason for that is this little switch right here. We often call this the strangle switch, but basically what it is a bass cut switch. It passes high frequencies. So when you combine that with the neck pickup, you get something that sounds like this. Oh yeah, all right. Pretty impressive, right? Like, when I realized that's what I was hearing all this time, oh, it blew my mind. Another one of my favorite features of the Jaguar that a lot of people just don't seem to get at all is actually the Fender mute. If you don't know what the mute does, it basically is a spring and plunger activated plate that forces a bit of foam into the path of your strings, deadening the sustain, making them sound a lot more like a banjo than a guitar. That's so much fun! And I totally get why some people don't really care for this. Number one, it's just a weird sound, so, not everyone's gonna find a use for it. But number two, when set up incorrectly, the mute can absolutely throw your guitar out of tune and, in fact, very sharp. So if you plan on using the mute, it is essential for you to play with the height and setting of the screws that hold the plate in. That's number one. Number two, if the foam is brand new and very stiff on the mute, it can exacerbate this issue to a very extreme degree. So like on this guitar with very new, very hard foam, it's going to take a minute for it to wear in. That's just par for the course. But don't worry, over time, that will get better. As I mentioned before, the American original is not all that different from the AV65s, and so some of those features absolutely carry over, like the very thick neck, the binding, as well as the angled neck pocket, which I discussed in the AV65 thin skin video, which I will link to in the description down below. To briefly recap my feelings on the angled neck pocket, it's a good idea and relatively well implemented. I have very few complaints except for the fact that it is just a little bit too much pitchback, causing the bridge to be very high off the body and the pickups as well. But the angled neck pocket is indeed doing its job. The bridge is stable. The strings are staying in place. There are no excess rattles and buzzes like you might hear on a guitar with a suboptimal amount of pitchback. So to call it a mark against the guitar, that would be disingenuous. It's working as intended, and it's working great. So while I admit that this is not a feature that the average guitarist is going to need to worry about or even expend any precious brain thinking on, it's not that kind of feature, but it is worth mentioning as a feature for those of you who are very interested in offset guitars like me. I find all of these little tweaks and changes very interesting and you know, a lot of fun to think about as an experiment. So don't worry about it. It's fine. The guitar is great. It's going to play just fine. It's just a feature worth noting. I also think it's worth mentioning the 9.5-inch radius on the fretboard because it's very modern for Fender, but it is also very comfortable. It affects the way the guitar plays as well as how well it bends. Personally, I definitely prefer a 7.25 radius. That is just what I enjoy. I really like that feel, but not everybody does. So if you're looking for something that is vintage inspired, but has a few modern touches that makes it a little bit more stable, a little bit more solid, and a little more thoughtless, like you don't have to think about, oh, what's wrong with my guitar? Because that's pretty much been taken care of for you. The American Original Jaguar is absolutely a great buy, a great addition to the Jaguar lineage. Overall, it's just a great guitar and a lot of fun to play too. I've really enjoyed my time with this guitar, and I think the color is really great. This is Daphne Blue, a little bit more saturated than what you would find in a Sonic Blue, and this just looks great. Now, as I'm sitting here trying to catalog all of my thoughts about the American Original, it strikes me that there is just not a lot of negative that I can say about this thing. It's not heavy, it plays great, it sounds great, like all of those things are as they should be. There is, however, one complaint that I have that indeed carries over from the AV65 I recently reviewed, and that is the trem cavity? What is with these trem cavities being so shallow? You can see that I'm pressing this down and I'm not even reaching the body before it bottoms out, like right here. Right here it bottoms out. And this is not something that's going to bother most people because, again, as I noted in the charcoal frost guitar video, a lot of people are just getting that subtle Jaguar warble out of these things, and that's totally fine. But if you're going crazy on this thing, I mean, it absolutely bottoms out, and you can hear it. And so I humbly offer this information to you that the AV65 and the AO seems to have an issue with the cavity being a little too shallow. And when I was in my initial fact-finding phase, trying to figure out what the heck is going on with these vibrato routes, I discovered impressions in the cavity floor from the vibrato arm hitting it. That's just worrisome. I have no idea what's going on and why they're so shallow, if they need to be deeper, or if the arm is now too long. I really will get to the bottom of this at some point. Also, this is a brand new guitar, and I did encounter one quality control issue, and that was that the ground wire to the vibrato was just hanging loose inside the cavity. Now, this is something that I went ahead and fixed myself, and it wasn't a big deal to do so. I actually find myself adding ground wires to the vibrato on a lot of offsets because many of them didn't come with it. Most offsets are grounded to the treble side bridge thimble. That's just how they've always been done, and that's fine, but I get a little bit more security out of running a ground wire to the vibrato itself. So while I don't enjoy being the bearer of bad quality control news, that is just something that I discovered on this particular guitar. So if you have an American Original Jaguar, you might want to just take a look, little peek inside the cavity, make sure that your ground wire is properly installed. So yeah, that was not great to discover, but as far as quality control issues go, that's one of the least problematic that I've found in recent memory. So good job, I guess. Those very small complaints aside, I really enjoyed my time with the American Original Jaguar. I think this is a beautiful guitar that's well built, and it's got a hell of a good sound. So, do I recommend this guitar? Absolutely, wholeheartedly. Great guitar. Especially for those of you, and you know who you are, who like your necks big and fat and full and impossible to play. I can't do this. It's uncomfortable for me, but your mileage absolutely will vary. I just like them skinny necks, man. I can't get over it. Pancake has absolutely ruined me for every other guitar, and that's just something that we're all going to have to get used to because I'm probably not going to stop mentioning it. But like I said, these guitars are highly recommended and very good. So again, if you're in the market, check out the American Original. I think you'll be surprised. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I do hope this video has been informative for you, especially if you've been looking at these and wondering what your old pal Mike thought of them. Well, questions answered, friends. Now, if you've had your eyes on an American Original or you already own one, I would love to know what your thoughts are. Do you love it? Do you hate it? What would you rate it? Do you recommend these guitars? Do you think they're great? Or do you say pass? If you say pass, I don't know that I can agree. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're taking care of yourself and each other. Stay tuned for more reviews on this channel, and we'll see you in the next one.